Hello and welcome. This is Padma Menon from Moving Archetypes. In this video, we are going to explore an enigmatic goddess of disorder called Nirrti. We're also going to consider what is the place of disorder in a primordial or archetypal cosmos. I'm going to share a story from my life about how some of this intelligence of the primordial Nirrti cosmos manifested for me in my own life. But before we go any further, I hope that you will like, subscribe and share your comments. And if you like this video, please don't forget to share it with others who may also enjoy this content. Disorder for us in our ordinary lives is not something that offers anything creative or life-enhancing or positive. And that is how it should be. Because when we live in lives that are mind-led or led by the paradigms of the mind, which are linear, which are about good and bad, about these dualities, we organize them accordingly. So we organize them as problems and as solutions. So in other words, in a mind-led approach to reality, reality is more or less a problem that we must solve. There are these situations that arise which must then be analyzed and solved. And this is, of course, the dominant approach to reality that all of us live by. The other day, I came across this framework, which is a framework of problem solving. It's called Cynefin, C-Y-N-E-F-I-N. I hope I've got the spelling right. And it was an interesting framework because what it did was divide problems or arrange problems into different kinds. So they can be simple, they can be complex, they can have a multi-sectorial composition, or they can be even chaotic. And in all of these quadrants, we can bring about a frame of analysis, we can bring about different groups of expertise and analyze it, and we problem solve it. What is interesting is right in the middle of the framework was a little circle called disorder. And disorder was the intractable situation. We do not want disorder. We can have even chaos and complexity and multisectorial complexity, but disorder is something that we must not allow. And it was almost as if we don't problem solve, then we will end up in this disorder, which is intractable and unsolvable. And that is definitely not where we want to be. And of course, this is very understandable, as I said, from a problem solving framework, where disorder often can mean anarchy or destruction or nothing comes out of it, but it is just a kind of anarchic, destructive movement. So when we come to disorder, there is already, our mind puts brakes on us. As you're listening to me, perhaps you can start sensing these brakes within yourself. Why do we have to consider disorder? And what is this goddess of disorder? How can disorder be divine? But disorder has a very different role and a different movement when we come into the archetypal or primordial cosmos. So we are going to consider Nirrti, the divinity of disorder, and disorder itself in this primordial realm. The movement of primordiality, the movement of this fullness of reality, is often described as the ebbing and flowing and spreading. So it's a multi-dimensional movement. It's not only the ebb and flow, but as you know, when an ocean tide ebbs and flows, it is also at the same time, there is this vastness and this spreading going on. So it is a multi-dimensional movement. As part of this ebb and flow, there is always this movement of retreating when the ebbing happens. So there is a retreat, there is a relinquishing, there is a dissolving, there is a removal, and there is this inward movement. which is absolutely necessary, because without the ebb, there is no flow. And so the proposal here is that this ebbing movement is the movement where this experience of disorder is positioned. So if we consider it in a bigger context, let's consider it in, say, for example, in the movement of the different geological ages on Earth. So we know that if you consider the long history, the geological history of Earth, that there have been these big movements. We can understand from studying geology that there have been these big movements, big changes on Earth, which have been cataclysmic events that have been followed by emergence of life, of circumstances which are very often completely other and different to what followed, to what was existing before that event. So when we speak about things like rebirth or reincarnation, we sometimes assume that it is a repetition. It's the same thing happening again and again. But if you consider the primordial movements, we can find out that in fact that is not the case. That it could be that at one time, for example, where I live in Canberra, at one time it was about 450 million years ago, it was a shallow, warm tropical sea. And today, here we are, there is a city here, and it's a completely different vegetation. It is not tropical anymore. And so it's inland, it's quite far, it's a couple of hours away from the coast. So we know that what follows is completely different from what has been before. And so this is where we have this experience of disorder, because it is a space of not knowing. When the ebbing happens, when the relinquishing and the letting go, when the dissolving happens, when we see that everything that we know, that we've held on to, that we have been so sure about, that have been absolutes, and they are crumbling and falling away and falling into ruin, then we are in the space of I don't know. And that is a terrifying space, and it is a space of disorder. It's that space at the center of that framework. We cannot, it's almost like we cannot come to that space. We have to somehow make everything fit into the quadrants where we can still analyze, where we can bring expertise, which is of course accumulated previous knowledge, where we can bring that and somehow try to solve the problem. But in this primordial situation, when we are faced with this ebbing, where things fall away, there is this truth that I don't know. We don't know what is happening, and we don't know what is going to happen. And that is that experience of disorder, when we cannot bring analysis, we cannot bring our previous expertise, our knowledge, our experience. None of that is relevant in this movement of relinquishing. And this movement of relinquishing, letting go, dissolving is the doorway to what we call self-inquiry or archetypal inquiry or inquiry into the consciousness, which in the end are all the same thing. This primordial, the inquiry into our primordial nature, our authenticity at that primordial level. It is always begun, or it is always initiated by this process of relinquishing. And what is the disorder here is not only that we have to relinquish, but that it is not something that we can plan. In other words, we can't decide what we are going to relinquish. Sometimes I find that people have these very deliberate ideas about austerity or even monasticism, and I'm not talking about monks or monasticism in general. I'm talking about where we may be slightly naive about applying those frameworks here in self-inquiry, and we may think that we can decide what to give up, that we should give up our job or our family or a particular way of living. So we have these plans we make about what we are going to relinquish. But the truth of the matter is that when we just open ourselves to the inquiry, it is cataclysmic in an intimate way, in that it is going to be sudden and unexpected, that the relinquishing, that what is going to be relinquished, what is going to dissolve, just simply disappear or be taken away, is not going to be what we have planned. That it will be as it needs to be, in that interplay between our mental consciousness, where we are coming from, our point of departure, and the consciousness, the primordial consciousness as it is in that moment. Because of course these are all living, changing, transient experiences and movements. It is not that there is a fixed primordial consciousness and a fixed mental consciousness, and therefore we can have this recipe for here is what you need to relinquish and this is what's going to happen. No, it is not that, because if reality is an ebb and flow, then it is always changing, it's transient, it's ever changing. And in fact, if you consider even the Chinese book, I Ching, which is a book of divination, it is based on the fundamental principle of change. So change, if there's anything that is consistent about reality, especially primordial reality, it is constant change. And so we can't plan for what we're going to relinquish, how it's going to look like. But every time we come to that self-inquiry, every time we turn to the door of the cave and we are ready to allow the relinquishing, then whatever needs to be relinquished will be relinquished. There is a great generosity, compassion, and intelligence in the primordial philosophies, in the archetypal philosophies and these philosophies about the primordial. They are not naive. They have an incredible amount of intelligence about the truth of how we will encounter and what we will experience in these movements of self-inquiry. And so there is complete recognition that this movement of relinquishing is not going to be something that is going to just be all positive and happy. Neither is it going to be only one of suffering. But the truth is that we are going to experience it as a loss. And therefore, when we come to Nirrti, there is all of these different nuances in this disorder that is invoked in this incredibly complex, multi-dimensional, enigmatic goddess, Nirrti. She is an ancient goddess who is described as shimmering, golden-hued, with golden locks of hair, a golden skin. But at the same time, there are also hymns that speak of her with fear, with unease. They even say she might cause illness, that they would like her to be far away. So there is this tension in the invocations of Nirrti, which speak very much to our own feelings when we are experiencing this movement of relinquishing. When we encounter disorder, it's almost impossible as a human to say we're going to be okay and somehow we're going to be the master of disorder. Well, how could that be? Because if we can master disorder, it's not disorder. So there is no mastery of disorder possible, that each one of us, everyone, from whoever is the highest or the most enlightened to the least enlightened, if there is such a scale, which I in my opinion there isn't, but everybody is brought to this same experience of fear, discomfort, unease. But at the same time, if we can be present, there is also this shimmering, infinite possibilities that is held within that disorder. That this, what we don't know, that excitement, that sense of expectation, anticipation. This is the birthplace of creativity. Creativity as something that doesn't exist before, something that is entirely new, that is fresh. This was the original archetypal expression of creativity. It is birthed from this disorder, and it is not something that was there before, but it is something completely new, fresh, a new insight, a new experience, something that is startling, something that is like a lightning strike, something that illumines suddenly. So that is this shimmering quality of Nirrti, and equally there is also our unease, our fear, our wish to simply either Nirrti goes away, or that we can go away, or that the disorder disappears, and that something of what we know that we can cling to, that it will emerge again. So all of this is recognized and validated in an archetypal invocation. I just want to speak about that sense of loss and being taken away, because that is so real. And sometimes we have this bypassing where we think it should be one or the other, and that is again a mind-led approach. It should be all good or it should be all bad, but it can be and. So an archetypal space, the most useful word I find is the and word. It can be this and that and that and that. It's an and space, it's an everythingness space. So let me just dwell on this experience of being taken away. Very often there are these deities at the doorway of the cave, as it's called, or at the beginning of an archetypal ritual or a ceremony or an invocation. And what is interesting is that many of these deities are presented as thieves or bandits, those who take things away from you, those who steal things from you. And this is such an incredibly creative way of experiencing these moments where we will feel as if in this relinquishing, in this ebbing, that things are being stolen from us, that things to which we are entitled, to which we have a right to, which we own, whether it is in terms of material things or our expertise and our experience and what we already know, it's as if they are being stolen from us, snatched away from us. And these deities are sometimes represented as people who snatch things away from us. So from our mind's perspectives, they may not even be likable. But if you consider it from an archetypal perspective, these deities are a mixture of deception, humor, but also incredibly protective and very strong. And so we can rely on their company, on their strength to be with us, even as we feel that things are being stolen from us or we're losing things. And that is that invitation to our own, that strength and ferocity, that primordial strength and ferocity, which has an intelligence already of these movements. If we can come into that through these archetypes, then we are able to be present where in this movement of disorder, even when we are feeling like we are losing things or things are literally being stolen from us. So sometimes Nirrti is associated with a sense of impoverishing, a sense of poverty. And this is what this is alluding to, is the truth that we will feel as if we are being diminished and we are becoming poorer because of this movement of relinquishing, or things just being dissolved or ended or falling into ruin, that disorderly breaking up that is happening. So how can we be in these spaces? And that is where the archetypes and the devotion become really important. It is almost impossible to be present in disorder without the archetypal dimension. So that is why these archetypes are deities. It is as if we enthrone something. We enthrone the intelligence of reality, the divinity of reality, the sentience of reality itself. And when we enthrone, whether we consider them divine or whether we have deities or archetypes, or we find this enthronement in nature, it's all the same thing. But this movement of enthroning is where we are accepting to be taught. It is that humility of saying that we are ready to be taught. So the first step is, I don't know. And then I am ready to be taught. I am open to being taught. So there is a way in which this can be illustrated in our everyday life, and that is through the invocation of the waters as consciousness. So traditionally, in many archetypal wisdom practices, the oceanic waters or the oceans are invoked as consciousness. It is as if we can experience or even encounter consciousness in a material way as the oceanic bodies of water. And what happens is that when we want to go into these waters, we have to relinquish how we walk and how we are and how we live on the land. We have to become different, move in a different way, behave completely differently if we want to be in the water. Everything that we know on land is not really relevant in the waters. We have to allow the waters, the nature of the water, the quality of the water, the physics of the water, to teach us how to be in the waters. And it's exactly the same thing with reality. When we speak of the sentience of reality, it is not that we bring our definitions of sentience, by which we have said that some things are sentient and some things are not, which is that mind-led approach to sentience. Rather, we are taught what is sentience by a reality which is completely sentient. It's sentience everywhere. And this is that teaching which then allows us to be guided by that sentience, so that when we then come into our mental intelligence, our usual realities where the mind has its place, then the mind is able to bring to us an intelligence that is drenched in this vast, expansive sentience of reality, where we are a part of reality, not the masters of it. So this invocation of the divinity, or an invocation of enthronement, that we enthrone somebody, something, the deity, the archetype, nature, as our teacher, is the only way that there is an encounter. There is a fully present encounter with the disorder in this archetypal domain. Let me share a story with you from my own life about this aspect of Nirrti. I am preparing at this moment not just preparing, I have been teaching a course on waters and consciousness, where Nirrti has been part of this course. And one of the things that struck me is about the messages. So as I said, we receive the teaching. How do the teachings come to us? And so as I sat with this question, I was in my courtyard one day where I encountered this red parrot. The parrot appeared on a branch very close to me. It was at my shoulder level, about here. And I just stood still and I was looking at the parrot, and the parrot was talking to me with great passion. It was as if she had something that she really needed me to understand or to receive. And I had to say, I don't know. So I was standing there with this I don't know sensation, open. I said, I was feeling, I don't know what you're trying to say, but I am open and I'm listening and I'm receiving. This went on for at least 10 or 12 minutes. Afterwards, when I came in, I thought, I'm going to follow the breadcrumbs. So I'm going to look into what is the birds, there must be something about birds. And no sooner I started my research than I found that Nirrti's messengers are the birds. So my question about how do we receive this teaching, the answer is through messengers. And who are Nirrti's messengers? The birds. And then I began to realize that there is this invocation of birdsong. Again, very many traditional wisdom practices have this archetype of the birdsong. And so the birdsong, which is not the language as we know it, it's not textual, it's not the language as we have understood it, but it is a completely other language. And what came to me is that it must have something to do with the birds as messengers in the bird song. And then, as I was researching a little bit further, up came this poem about the red bird. This is a poem by Mary Oliver. Now, I did not put search terms in there like red bird or poem, nothing. It was totally unrelated to what I was looking at. And this poem came up. And I want to share with you the last verse of this poem by Mary Oliver, because I think it sums up everything about Nirrti and her cosmos. And this was my true task, to be the music of the body. Do you understand? For truly the body needs a song, a spirit, a soul. And no less to make this work, the soul has need of a body. And I am both of the earth and I am of the inexplicable beauty of heaven, where I fly so easily, so welcome, yes. And this is why I have been sent, to teach this to your heart. This is from Mary Oliver's Red Bird Explains Himself. How beautiful. And I think there's nothing more for me to say except that the bird song nature of teaching is about poetry, it's about movement, it's about savoring, it's about body, it's about sensations. And that is the way in which experiences like disorder bring the intelligence of the primordial into our everyday life.